Chapter 1. The Quiet Mask. The morning sun slanted through the kitchen window, painting the oak table with a golden glow. Daniel Bradford set a steaming mug of coffee in front of his wife, Jennifer, who barely looked up from her phone. She murmured a distracted thank you before her thumbs tapped away at whatever text demanded her attention so early. "Eggs or oatmeal, champ?" Daniel called to his son, Ethan, who was hunched over a bowl of cereal at the counter. "Eggs," the boy said without hesitation, lifting his eyes for the briefest smile before returning to a comic book. Daniel cracked eggs into the pan with the ease of habit. Every motion of his morning routine was smooth, practiced, almost rehearsed. To a neighbor peeking in through the window, the Bradfords looked like any other suburban family. A devoted husband, a distracted wife, two children who would be late for school if someone didn't hurry them along. But Daniel was always noticing. It was reflex. 20 years of watching for shadows where there shouldn't be shadows, for hands twitching near concealed weapons, for patterns that didn't add up. Civilians called it paranoia. Operators like him called it survival. And lately, there had been too many patterns in Jennifer's behavior that didn't add up. He carried the eggs to the table and set them down for Ethan. His daughter, Lily, bounded into the kitchen wearing one sock, her hair tangled from sleep. "Dad, where's my other pink sock?" she asked. Daniel crouched and kissed the top of her head, scanning the floor. "Probably in that tornado you call a bedroom. Check under the bed before I launch a rescue operation." She giggled, racing down the hallway. Ethan rolled his eyes. Jennifer still hadn't looked up. Daniel poured another coffee, his own this time, and studied his wife's face while sipping. The phone cast a blue light across her features, a faint smile curving her lips at some message he wasn't meant to see. She caught him watching and angled the phone away. "Work email," she said casually, too casually. On a Saturday, her lips pressed together, and she slid the phone face down onto the table. "Not everything runs on your schedule, Dan." He let the jab pass with a faint smile. "Fair enough." Later, when the kids were dropped at school and Jennifer left in the sedan, Daniel remained behind, standing in the quiet of the kitchen. The house always felt different once they were gone, too still, too staged. Like a set after the actors had exited. He moved down the hallway, his steps soundless despite the hardwood floor. The family photos lined the wall. The wedding in Maui, Ethan's Little League team, Lily on her bike with training wheels. They were real moments, yet they felt like props now. Daniel's hand found a small cabinet beside the office door. He bent, reached behind the panel, and slid out a lockbox no one else in the house knew existed. Inside, cushioned by dark foam, lay his old tools. A SIG sour pistol, a tactical knife, a compact encrypted radio. He ran his fingers across the grip of the gun, not out of longing, but because his body remembered the weight, the texture, the balance. Muscle memory didn't fade. He locked the box again. There was no immediate threat in the house, not yet. But his instincts were screaming that one was circling closer every day. By mid-morning, Daniel sat in his home office, running through spreadsheets from the security consultancy he ran with Mitchell. Their firm handled corporate risk assessments, cyber resilience, and executive protection. On paper, he was a civilian entrepreneur. In practice, his clients benefited from the intuition and ruthlessness that only 2 decades in Black Ops could teach. The phone buzzed. Mitchell's voice came through, bright and direct. "Morning, partner. Got that presentation deck polished yet?" "Almost," Daniel said. "We'll run through it Monday. But I need a favor." Mitchell chuckled. "You asking for a favor? That's a collector's item. What's up?" Daniel hesitated, staring at the closed office door. "Jennifer's been off. Late calls. Shutting her laptop when I walk in. Texts at night, she doesn't explain." "Yikes." Mitchell paused, the levity gone. "You think it's—" "I don't think. I notice. And what I notice is enough to bother me." "All right," Mitchell said slowly. "You want me to poke around?" Quietly. No tales, no obvious digs. Just a background sweep. Numbers, contacts. See if anyone's circling her who shouldn't be." There was silence on the line. Then Mitchell said, "Dan, you sure you want me looking? Once we start pulling at threads, I'm sure." His voice carried the kind of steel that ended arguments. That evening, Daniel tried to wear the quiet mask again. They sat at the dinner table, spaghetti night, Lily's favorite. Jennifer laughed at something Ethan said about his teacher, but Daniel watched the way her laughter stopped too abruptly when her phone buzzed on the counter. She excused herself, wiped her hands, and stepped into the hallway to take the call. Ethan slurped noodles and said, "She's been on the phone a lot lately." Daniel forced a smile. "Work stuff." Lily frowned. "But she works at the gallery. Don't they close at 5? Daniel's fork clinked against his plate. "Eat your dinner, sweetheart." He listened as Jennifer's voice drifted faintly from the hall, low and hushed, like someone afraid of being overheard. When she returned, she avoided his eyes. That night, after the children were asleep, Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, watching Jennifer brush her hair at the vanity. "You've been distracted," he said quietly. She met his gaze in the mirror. "Everyone gets distracted. Not you. Not like this." Her hand slowed, then stilled. For a moment, he thought she might confess something, anything, but she only gave a brittle smile. "You read too much into things." He said nothing more. He slid under the covers, eyes open in the dark long after she turned off the lamp. The next morning, he jogged before dawn, pounding the quiet streets of their neighborhood. To anyone watching, he was just another middle-aged dad trying to keep in shape. But every stride carried calculation. He mapped exit routes, noted security cameras, cataloged blind corners. Old habits, necessary habits. As he rounded the last block, his mind replayed Jennifer's smile at her phone, the sudden shift of her posture, the lies too practiced to be careless. His gut told him something had shifted in his home, in his marriage. And Daniel Bradford had survived too many battlefields to ignore his gut. By the time he returned home, sweat cooling on his skin, his decision was made. He would not confront Jennifer, not yet. First, he needed clarity. He needed intelligence. He picked up his phone and sent Mitchell a single text. "Run the check." Then he slid the device back into his pocket, poured himself a glass of water, and looked around the silent kitchen. The facade of perfection still held for now. But Daniel knew the cracks were widening, and whatever lay behind them, he intended to find out. Chapter 2, The File. The rain hadn't let up all morning. By the time Mitchell's black SUV pulled into Daniel Bradford's driveway, the gutters were spilling like open faucets. Daniel stood at the window, watching, his hand loosely wrapped around a mug of untouched coffee. Mitchell killed the engine, stepped out, and jogged through the downpour with a leather satchel tucked under his jacket. He rapped twice on the door in their old signal, two quick, one long. Daniel opened without a word. "Morning sunshine," Mitchell said, shaking water from his hair as he stepped inside. He was tall, sharp-featured, his coat dripping onto the hardwood. "You look like you've been pacing since dawn." "I was." Daniel shut the door and locked it. "You brought it." Mitchell tapped the satchel. "Hot off the wire. You're not going to like it." They moved into the study. Daniel closed the blinds, flicked on the desk lamp, and gestured for Mitchell to sit. The room smelled faintly of leather and gun oil. He always kept it that way, even when pretending to be nothing more than a suburban dad running a security consultancy. Mitchell set the satchel down carefully, like it contained something alive. He unclipped it, reached inside, and withdrew a manila folder thick with documents. "Ran her numbers, emails, the works," Mitchell said. "Called in a favor for my guy at the telecom company. He owes me from that mess in Caracas." Daniel said nothing, just opened the folder. Inside were glossy surveillance photographs, time-stamped and labeled. Jennifer, his wife, stepping out of a gallery after hours, sitting across from a man in an expensive suit at an Italian restaurant. A hand brushing her arm. The same man leaning close, too close, in a parked car. Daniel's jaw tightened, but his face remained impassive. Mitchell continued quietly. "Name's Andre Velasquez. Chicago-born, 38, mid-tier operator for the Torino crime family. Started out running cars, graduated to running crews. Not flashy enough for headlines, but he's building connections. The kind of guy who collects people like trading cards." Daniel turned a page. Bank statements. Money transfers. A wire deposit into a gallery account Jennifer had access to. "She's been taking money?" Daniel asked, voice flat. "Looks that way. Nothing huge. 5-6 grand a time." He's clever, routes it through dummy art purchases, fake donors. Daniel flipped another page. A copy of a text thread. Messages vague, but suggestive. Velasquez. Did you tell him yet? Jennifer. Not the right time. Mitchell leaned forward. Dan, this isn't just an affair. He's not courting her for romance. He's gathering intel. Look, he pointed at another sheet. He had her give details on your travel schedule. The consulting firm's clients. Hell, I found a background check run on you 3 weeks ago from one of his shell companies. Daniel shut the folder, exhaling slowly. So this isn't about her. It's about me. Bingo. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the rain against the window. Daniel finally spoke, voice low. Show me the rest. Mitchell reopened the folder. More surveillance photos, this time of Daniel himself, leaving the office, jogging his usual route, picking up the kids from school. Telephoto shots. Grainy, but accurate enough to make Daniel's stomach turn. They've been inside your perimeter for weeks, Mitchell said grimly. Professional-level surveillance. Not paparazzi crap. Somebody trained. Daniel closed the folder again, this time more gently, as though careful not to crush the evidence with his hands. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling, counting his breaths. 1, 2, 3. Old combat trick to steady the heart. Mitchell shifted. So what now? You want me to keep digging? Or are you going to, I'm going to do what I always do. Daniel's eyes lowered, hard as flint. Assess the threat. Build a plan. Eliminate variables. That night, the house felt heavier than usual. Jennifer hummed as she made tea in the kitchen, wearing her robe. The kids were upstairs finishing homework. To anyone else, it was domestic tranquility. To Daniel, it was a minefield. He sat at the table, the folder hidden in his study, the images burned into his mind. His eyes followed Jennifer's every motion, the way she glanced at her phone when she thought he wasn't looking, the way she angled the screen away. Long day, she asked lightly, pouring tea. Productive. You and Mitchell get the Thompson contract sorted? Almost. His voice was even practiced. We'll finalize Monday. She smiled, but her gaze flicked to her phone again when it buzzed. She hesitated, then silenced it. Daniel leaned back, folding his arms. You've been busy lately. Gallery's preparing for an exhibit, she said smoothly, too smoothly. A lot of late nights. He held her gaze. Anything else? Her hand tightened on the mug, just slightly before she lifted it. No. Why? Just asking. He forced a smile, one he'd used in interrogation rooms overseas when he wanted the other man to think he'd given nothing away. Jennifer gave a brittle laugh. You're suspicious of everything, Daniel. Sometimes a late night is just a late night. He said nothing. After she went to bed, Daniel remained in the study, lights low. The folder lay open again, papers spread across the desk. He took a legal pad and began jotting notes in precise block letters. Assets at risk. Ethan, Lily, Jennifer. Vulnerabilities. Predictable routines, school drop-off, jogging route, office commute. Adversary. Andre Velasquez. Capabilities. Organized crew, surveillance resources, financial leverage. Intent. Infiltration via Jennifer. Access to Daniel's business and network. He drew arrows, underlined names, mapped possibilities. Each scenario branched into contingencies. Then he flipped the pad and began sketching safe routes. The old ones he hadn't touched in years. Emergency exfil paths from the neighborhood. Fallback safe houses he still had access to. He pulled a small burner phone from his lockbox and charged it, just in case. The rain had stopped. The night was silent. But Daniel knew silence was never peace. Silence was the breath before the shot, the pause before the ambush. He set down his pen and rubbed his temples. Jennifer's voice drifted faintly from the bedroom upstairs, muffled by the door. She was on the phone again, low and hushed. He couldn't make out the words, only the tone, conspiratorial, almost tender. He closed his eyes. Not yet. He would not confront her yet. First, he needed leverage. He needed proof beyond doubt. And, thanks to Mitchell, he now had a name. Andre Velasquez. Daniel whispered it once, as if testing the weight of it in his mouth. Then he opened his eyes and began drafting the next layer of contingencies. Chapter 3, Arrival of Threats. The doorbell rang at precisely 7:42 p.m. Daniel knew the time because he'd just checked his watch before tucking Lily into bed. She had asked for one more story, and he'd obliged, reading in his steady baritone until her eyelids fluttered shut. Downstairs, Jennifer was finishing dishes, humming off-key. To anyone else, the timing might have felt ordinary. To Daniel Bradford, it felt like a move on a chessboard. He padded down the stairs silently, loosening his shoulders as though preparing for a workout. Through the glass panels of the front door, he saw 3 silhouettes. One stood slightly forward, cocky in posture, his weight shifted to one hip. 2 others loomed behind him, thicker, bulkier, built for intimidation rather than finesse. Daniel opened the door. "Evening, Mr. Bradford," the forward man said smoothly. His suit was expensive, tailored, and his cologne hit first, a sharp, musky presence meant to dominate the space. He had slicked back hair and eyes too alert for a mere social call. "Mind if we come in?" Daniel didn't move. His gaze slid once, cataloging the bulges under their jackets, the bodyguard stances. Right hand dominant. One twitchy, one calm. All 3 armed. "Who's asking?" Daniel replied evenly. The man smiled, flashing perfect teeth. "Andre Velasquez. A friend of your wife's." The words were bait. Daniel let them hang in the air. Jennifer appeared in the hallway, drying her hands with a towel. When she saw Velasquez, her breath caught. "Andre, what are you?" Andre lifted a finger, silencing her with a smirk. "Jennifer, sweetheart. Thought I'd stop by and introduce myself to the husband. It's only polite, don't you think?" Jennifer paled. "This isn't—" "Daniel, I didn't." Daniel raised a hand gently. "It's fine, Jen. Why don't you go upstairs with the kids?" "But now—" His tone left no room for debate. She swallowed hard and vanished up the stairs. The moment she was gone, Daniel stepped back from the doorway. 5 minutes. Then you're gone." Velasquez grinned, strolling inside as if he owned the place. His men followed, closing the door behind them. The living room, cozy and warmly lit, suddenly felt smaller, the air thick with tension. Velasquez ran a hand over the back of the couch like he was appraising furniture at an auction. "You've got a nice setup here, Bradford. Nice house. Nice family. Nice business. Shame if any of that got messy." Daniel said nothing. He stood by the armchair, posture relaxed, but his eyes missed nothing. The bodyguard spread out, one near the hallway, the other near the window. Classic formation, cut-off exits, control space. Velasquez pulled something from his jacket and tossed it onto the coffee table. Glossy photos slid across the wood. Daniel glanced down. Surveillance images of Ethan at soccer practice. Lily at the school playground. Jennifer outside the gallery. Himself, jogging in the neighborhood. Velasquez leaned closer, his voice smooth. "See, we've been watching. You're predictable, Dan. Everyone you care about, right here in black and white." Daniel studied the photos, his face unreadable. "What do you want?" Velasquez chuckled, pulling a folded set of papers from his jacket. He flicked them open with theatrical flair, divorce documents. "I want you to sign. Tonight. No fuss, no lawyers, just signatures. Your wife, your house, your kids, they're mine now." Daniel let out a low laugh, surprising even himself. "That's your play." Velasquez's grin sharpened. "Don't underestimate me. I know who you are, Mr. Bradford. I know your business depends on reputation, trust, discretion. Imagine what happens when clients find out their security expert can't even keep his own house in order. Imagine the headlines." He tapped the photos again. "Or imagine what happens if one of these little ones has an accident. Tragic, isn't it? A car that doesn't stop at the crosswalk. A fire in the wrong room of the house. Life is fragile." One of the bodyguards smirked. The others simply stared, eyes flat. Daniel's hand stayed loose at his sides, but his mind was moving fast. Every angle, every weapon in reach, every second mattered. "You think this scares me?" Daniel asked quietly. Velasquez leaned in, his breath heavy with cologne and arrogance. "I don't need to scare you. I just need you to cooperate. Sign, and all of this continues." Daniel picked up the pen Velasquez had placed beside the papers. He twirled it between his fingers, expression calm. "Sign, huh? That's right." He set the pen down, tapping it once against the table. To anyone else, It was a nervous tick. To Mitchell, watching from the listening channel Daniel had opened earlier through a disguised mic in a study lamp, it was the agreed-upon signal. Move into position. Velasquez mistook the gesture for hesitation. Good man. You're smarter than you look. Daniel's smile was thin, humorless. You don't know how smart I look. The gangster narrowed his eyes. What's that supposed to mean? Daniel straightened, suddenly tired of the charade. It means I've dealt with men like you in places you can't pronounce, on nights you'll never forget. You think you're playing chess. You're not. You're playing checkers on a board you don't even own. The bodyguard shifted, uneasy. Velasquez snarled. You think you're untouchable? You're just another has-been soldier with a family he can't protect. Sign the damn papers. Daniel lowered his gaze, then lifted the documents, skimming them as though considering. His face betrayed nothing. Fine, he said at last, voice calm. If this is what you want. Relief flickered in Velasquez's eyes, just for a second. Daniel walked to the desk by the window, retrieving a pen. He bent slightly, posture angled toward the curtains. Outside, down the block, Mitchell's SUV idled dark, waiting. As Daniel uncapped the pen, he brushed his fingers once against the edge of the blinds, a second signal, nearly invisible. Mitchell would know. It's time. Daniel set the pen to paper, his hand steady. But his mind was elsewhere, mapping the escape routes, cataloging the weapons hidden in the house, and timing every step of what came next. He signed nothing. Instead, he laid the papers flat on the desk and turned back toward Velasquez, expression neutral. You'll have what you came for soon enough. And with that, he pivoted smoothly, slipping toward the back hallway, toward the hidden safe routes he'd prepared years ago, long before Jennifer had ever met Andre Velasquez. The game had changed. Chapter 4, Wellington Room. The Wellington Hotel loomed like a fortress of glass and steel against the Chicago skyline. Its marble lobby gleamed under chandeliers, filled with the low hum of wealthy patrons and corporate travelers. To the untrained eye, it was just another high-end hotel. To Daniel Bradford, it was a trap. He slipped in through a side entrance, moving like a shadow. His suit was dark, pressed, anonymous. He looked like a businessman heading to a late meeting. In truth, he was armed, wired, and already calculating exit routes. Jennifer's car had been tracked here, her movements reported by Mitchell's discreet surveillance team. Daniel knew exactly which room she was headed to. The Wellington Room, a private banquet suite often rented for business discussions. He moved quickly down the corridor, past the hushed front desk, past the elevators, into the service stairwell. His steps were noiseless. At the second-floor landing, Daniel paused, listening. A man's voice, muffled but sharp, echoed faintly down the hall. Jennifer's softer reply followed, her tone strained. Daniel checked his watch. Right on time. Inside the Wellington Room, Andre Velasquez leaned back in a leather chair at the head of the table, his suit jacket open, his arrogance palpable. Jennifer sat across from him, pale and nervous, her hands clenched in her lap. Two bodyguards flanked the door, broad and menacing. One toyed with the strap of his holster. The other cracked his knuckles slowly, as if daring anyone to interrupt. Velasquez slid a folder across the table toward Jennifer. Surveillance photos spilled out. Daniel jogging, the kids at school, Jennifer herself walking into the gallery. You see, Velasquez said smoothly, your husband thinks he's clever, but I've been 3 steps ahead the whole time. Sign these papers, sweetheart. Make it easy. Jennifer's lip trembled. This isn't what you promised. You said I said what I needed to. Velasquez cut in, smirking. Now be smart. Choose me. Choose security. He's finished. The door clicked. All heads turned. Daniel entered the room without hurry, as if he had been expected. His eyes swept across the scene once, cold and assessing, then fixed on Jennifer. Get up, he said quietly. Jennifer gasped. Daniel, Velasquez's grin faltered, then returned sharper, mocking. Well, the ghost himself. You weren't supposed to walk in yet. He nodded to his men. Gentlemen. The nearest bodyguard stepped forward, reaching under his jacket. Daniel moved first. His hand shot out, gripping the guard's wrist, twisting it outward until bone ground against bone. The man howled, the pistol clattering to the floor. Daniel slammed his elbow into the guard's jaw, dropping him instantly. The second bodyguard lunged, fist raised. Daniel pivoted, caught the punch midair, and used the man's momentum to hurl him over the conference table. Glasses and papers scattered as the thug crashed across the surface, sending Velasquez's folder flying. Jennifer shrieked, scrambling back from the chaos. Velasquez pushed up from his chair, fury etched across his face. "Do you know who you're dealing with?" Daniel's eyes never left him. "Unfortunately, yes." The second bodyguard staggered up, pulling a knife from his boot. He slashed at Daniel, fast and desperate. Daniel stepped in close, his movements surgical. He grabbed the man's wrist, redirected the blade, and slammed it downward into the thug's own thigh. The man screamed, collapsing to the ground. "Stay down," Daniel growled. The first guard, blood dripping from his mouth, crawled toward his fallen gun. Daniel kicked it across the floor, out of reach. One smooth motion, no wasted energy. Velasquez's hand twitched toward his jacket. "Don't," Daniel warned. His voice was calm, deadly serious. Velasquez ignored him. He pulled a pistol from his waistband, leveling it across the table. His eyes gleamed with triumph. Jennifer screamed, "No." Daniel didn't hesitate. His sidearm appeared in his hand as if conjured. A single shot cracked through the room. Velasquez staggered, his pistol slipping from his grip. He clutched his side, crimson blooming across his white shirt. His knees buckled, and he collapsed into the chair, gasping. The silence afterward was deafening. Jennifer covered her mouth, trembling. The bodyguards groaned on the floor, broken and bleeding, but alive. Daniel lowered his pistol, expression cold. He stepped forward, retrieving the folder of photos and evidence from the table. He flipped through them with clinical detachment, then tucked them into his jacket pocket. Velasquez coughed, blood flecking his lips. You think this ends it?" His voice rasped. "The Torinos will bury you." Daniel leaned close, his tone like ice. "Street fighting is messy. 20 years in the shadows taught me how to make men vanish without a trace. You made a fatal error, Andre. You touched my family." Velasquez tried to sneer, but it twisted into a grimace of pain. Daniel turned away from him, eyes on Jennifer. "We're leaving. Now." She hesitated, fear and confusion warring in her face. "Daniel, I later." His voice softened, but only slightly. "We don't have time." Jennifer nodded shakily, rising to her feet. Daniel moved to the wall near the fire alarm. With one sharp tug, the handle came down. Sirens blared instantly, red strobes flashing throughout the hallway outside. The building erupted into noise and motion. Alarms, shouting, the shuffle of hurried footsteps as guests evacuated. The chaos was their cover. Daniel slipped his arm around Jennifer, guiding her firmly but gently toward the side exit he had mapped before ever stepping into the hotel. Behind them, Velasquez groaned in his chair, his blood dripping onto the fine carpet. The bodyguards lay where they'd fallen, incapacitated, useless. The Wellington room was a battlefield of broken glass, scattered papers, and echoing alarms. And Daniel Bradford walked out of it alive, his wife at his side, the blackmail evidence secured in his pocket, their escape masked by the chaos he had engineered. Chapter 5, The Torinos Notice. The safe house was a forgotten cabin along the Calumet River, an old fisherman's shack Daniel had refurbished years ago for contingencies like this. From the outside, it looked abandoned, paint peeled from weather-beaten wood. The roof sagged in places, but inside it was airtight. Reinforced doors, blackout curtains, hidden compartments stocked with weapons, fuel, rations, and a secure uplink. Mitchell leaned against the plywood table, eyes scanning the laptop's glowing screen. His hair was messy, a 2-day stubble shading his jaw, but his mind worked like a razor. Surveillance feeds, intercepted chatter, and financial traces streamed across the monitor. "You didn't just swat a fly," Mitchell muttered. "You kicked over a nest." Velasquez wasn't freelancing. He was a paid feeder for the Torinos. He collected intel, smoothed deals, softened targets. Daniel sat across from him, silent, his posture calm but coiled. He cleaned his pistol with methodical precision, each movement muscle memory. The blackmail folder lay open nearby, Jennifer's frightened face staring out from grainy surveillance photos. Velasquez reached too far, Daniel said at last. His voice was even flat. But the family won't see it that way. They already don't. Mitchell turned the laptop toward him. On the screen was a grainy satellite shot of a warehouse in Cicero, tagged with movement indicators. Word is out. The Torinos called in a cleaner, Lance Lawrence. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Lawrence, XSAS, contract hitter, the kind they use when they want bodies to disappear without a ripple. Mitchell gave a humorless smile. The kind who actually knows what he's doing. They want this wrapped quick and bloody. Jennifer, sitting off to the side with her arms folded tight around herself, spoke up for the first time. So, they'll come after you? Us. Her voice was fragile, her guilt still fresh, her world unraveling. Daniel's gaze softened only slightly as it landed on her. They'll come after everything that looks like leverage. Which means yes, us. Jennifer lowered her head, tears pricking her eyes. I never thought, no. Daniel cut in, but not unkindly. You didn't. He slid his pistol back into its holster, then stood. But thinking was always my job. Pier 47 stank of salt, diesel, and rust. An industrial dock along Lake Michigan. Its warehouses had long been half-abandoned, used mostly by smugglers and night crews who didn't ask questions. Daniel had chosen it for that reason. Isolation, predictable entry points, and nowhere for enemies to vanish once they committed. The moon hung low and pale over the water. Daniel moved across the dock like a shadow, crouched low, planting small charges along stacked shipping containers. His hands were steady, the explosives minimal but precise, designed for controlled chaos, not wanton destruction. Through his earpiece, Mitchell's voice came soft and steady. Thermal drone has eyes. Convoy rolling in from Lakeshore, 5 minutes out. 3 SUVs and 1 stretch limo. That'll be your man. Copy, Daniel murmured. He armed the last charge and slipped behind a stack of pallets, pulling night vision goggles down over his eyes. The world turned green, sharpened. He checked his suppressed rifle, chambered around, then crouched low, listening. His breathing slowed. His heart rate dropped to the calm rhythm of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Headlights swept across the pier. Engines rumbled closer, tires crunching over gravel. The convoy rolled in like a funeral procession, 2 SUVs in front, the black limousine in the middle, another SUV behind. Doors opened. Men spilled out. Disciplined, heavily armed, scanning arcs like professionals. Not the average street muscle, Lawrence's crew. And then he emerged. Lance Lawrence was tall, broad-shouldered, his blonde hair cropped military short. He wore a tailored overcoat, his movements efficient, commanding. His gaze swept the pier with clinical precision, the look of a predator sizing up terrain. Daniel watched him through the scope, remembering dossiers, old chatter in Black Ops circles. Lawrence was lethal, and tonight he was hunting. Target confirmed, Mitchell whispered in his ear. Daniel exhaled once, long and steady, then pressed the detonator. The dock erupted in fire and steel. The first SUV disintegrated in a plume of orange, the shockwave hurling its occupants into the air. Screams tore through the night. Shrapnel shredded tires, twisted metal rained down. Lawrence didn't flinch. He barked orders, his men instantly shifting formation, weapons raised. Fan out. Find him. His voice was iron, calm amid the chaos. Daniel moved. He was no longer where they expected. Silent low, he slipped through shadows, rifle steady. One mercenary stepped into his path, sweeping with a submachine gun. A suppressed shot hissed. The man dropped without a sound. Another merc spun at the noise. Daniel lunged, blade flashing. One brutal strike under the ribs, twist, and the man gurgled silently before collapsing. The survivors fired blindly, bullets sparking against steel containers. Their muzzle flashes lit the pier in brief bursts. 2 down, Mitchell's voice confirmed. They're rattled. Daniel advanced. He triggered a second charge. This one blasted the rear SUV, flipping it on its side in a scream of tearing metal. Flames licked up into the night. painting the dock in firelight. "Who the hell are we fighting?" one merc shouted, panic rising. Lawrence shot him a glare sharp enough to cut steel. "You're fighting a dead man walking," he snarled. He raised his rifle and fired a burst into the darkness. "Bradford, you think you're a ghost? Come out and finish it." Daniel answered with a bullet that snapped past his ear, embedding in the limo's glass. Lawrence ducked, then rolled behind the open door of the limo, returning fire with disciplined bursts. His men regrouped, 3 remaining, forming a protective wedge around him. But Daniel was already behind them. He moved with uncanny speed, a phantom slipping between containers. Another merc went down, a knife across his throat, dragged into shadows before his body hit the ground. The last 2 spun, spraying fire wildly. Daniel dropped prone, returned 3 clean shots. One collapsed screaming, the other fell silent instantly. Now only Lawrence remained. The fixer rose from behind the limo, breathing hard, face twisted in fury. His overcoat flapped as he leveled his rifle, scanning desperately. "You think you're the only one who's hunted ghosts, Bradford? I've burned men like you before." Daniel stepped from the shadows, calm, rifle steady. "Then you should have remembered how it ends." Lawrence fired first. Daniel's shot was cleaner. One suppressed crack, one precise impact. Lawrence staggered, rifle slipping from his hands. Blood bloomed across his chest. He dropped to his knees, glaring up at Daniel with hate that refused to die. "You've just declared war," he rasped. Daniel's eyes were cold. "No, you did the moment you touched my family." Lawrence fell, lifeless, his body crumpling beside the burning limo. Daniel lowered his weapon, scanning the pier. Flames roared, smoke twisted skyward. The air stank of cordite and blood. The water lapped quietly against the dock, indifferent to the carnage. In his earpiece, Mitchell's voice came steady. "Lawrence is down. All hostiles neutralized." Daniel exhaled, long and quiet. Then the war begins. He turned from the fire, disappearing into the night. Chapter 6: Gathering Allies. The cabin silence had grown heavy since the Pier 47 ambush. Jennifer tried to keep busy, washing dishes, folding clothes, but every clatter of porcelain made her flinch. The kids were hidden away at another safe location, guarded by Mitchell's most trusted contacts. Daniel didn't rest. He couldn't. The Torinos wouldn't absorb the loss of Velasquez and Lawrence quietly. They would regroup, probe, and strike back harder. For every move Daniel made, 10 counter-moves were already forming. That's why he needed a team. Mitchell leaned over a battered corkboard nailed to the wall, maps and photographs pinned in messy clusters. "We've got reach, Dan, but not eyes everywhere. We need specialists." Daniel nodded once. "I know who to call." The first call, Marcus Kane at midnight. Daniel dialed a number from memory. The line clicked after 2 rings. "Bradford?" The voice was gravel, tinged with suspicion. "It's me, Marcus. I need you." A long pause, then a dry chuckle. "You disappear for 5 years, and the first thing out of your mouth is a favor?" "Not a favor," Daniel said quietly. "A war. The kind you know too well." Marcus Kane had once been his fire team's heavy gunner in Kandahar. Retired now, he ran a back-alley gym in Detroit, training kids who had nothing but fists and anger. He was loyal, dangerous, and smart enough to know when Daniel wasn't exaggerating. Another pause, then. "Send me the address. I'll bring my toys." The second call, Lydia Cho. The next contact was less straightforward. Lydia Cho had been one of the most brilliant hackers Daniel had ever met, a legend in the digital underground, half myth to most. He found her in a dingy Brooklyn loft, the glow of 6 monitors painting her face in blue and green. When he knocked, she didn't look up. "You're 5 minutes late," she said. "That means you're rusty." Daniel smirked faintly. "You're still watching traffic cams." "Always." She turned, finally meeting his eyes. "So, why am I about to get shot at again?" "Because the people who came for me are bigger than gangs. They're reaching into places they shouldn't. I need every electronic breadcrumb." Lydia studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "Fine, but you're paying me in more than cash. I want stories. The ones you swore you'd never tell." Daniel gave the barest nod. "Deal." The third call, Ryan Keller the last was the most delicate. Ryan Keller, CIA analyst, still on the inside. Keller owed Daniel a debt, the kind that couldn't be written in official files. Years ago, in Ankara, Daniel had pulled him out of a botched exchange before a Turkish prison swallowed him whole. Keller met him in a quiet cafe in Arlington, his tie askew, his eyes darting nervously. "Jesus, Dan, do you know what it means, you sitting here with me?" "Yes," Daniel said simply. "It means you're going to balance a ledger." Keller swallowed hard. "What are you after?" "The Torinos have access to classified intelligence. Not scraps, deep files. They knew where to hit, what to say, what pressure points to pull. That doesn't happen without a leak." Keller shook his head, voice dropping. "You're asking me to look at people I shouldn't. People higher than you think." Daniel leaned in. "Then it's exactly what I need." The war room, 3 nights later. The safe house had transformed. Marcus arrived with duffel bags full of weapons, his massive frame filling the narrow doorway. Lydia's monitors now lined one wall, humming with streams of data. Keller brought encrypted files hidden on a flash drive, tucked into a coffee cup lid. Jennifer hovered on the margins, both relieved and terrified by the strange assembly of people now in her home. Mitchell addressed them all like a sergeant rallying troops. "We're not playing defense anymore. We're finding the leak." Lydia snorted, typing rapidly. "Already on it. Bank transfers, phone pings, offshore accounts. You'd be amazed what dirty money leaves behind when it's laundered through shell casinos." Marcus grinned, checking the chamber on a shotgun. "And when we find whoever's responsible, I'll make sure they don't breathe long enough to regret it." Keller frowned. This isn't just some dirty cop or customs official. The patterns in these files, someone with federal clearance greenlit Torino shipments. Someone buried deep. Daniel listened quietly, arms folded, eyes sweeping over the board. His mind worked in layers, contingencies stacked on contingencies. Then we peel the layers. Start at the bottom, move up. No assumptions. The first threads Lydia cracked into a private server within hours. She pushed her chair back, pointing at the screen. "Here, a customs inspector flag shipments tied to Torino fronts. Except every time, the flag disappeared. Wiped clean from the record." Mitchell leaned closer. "That's not bribes. That's official override." Keller rubbed his temples. "Which means someone with clearance at the agency level. Homeland, Treasury, maybe even CIA." Marcus spat on the floor. "Your old friends, Danny Boy." "Figures." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The team pushed deeper. Lydia mapped offshore accounts linking back to consulting firms in D.C. Mitchell traced a string of shell LLCs to contractors with suspiciously bloated budgets. Keller reluctantly pulled names from encrypted logs. And one by one, the picture formed. This wasn't small-time corruption. This was systemic. Rising tension, the nights blurred into each other, the team running on caffeine and nerves. Arguments flared. Marcus slammed his fist against the table. "This is taking too long. We should be breaking bones, not breaking code." Lydia shot him a glare. "Yeah, and when you kick down the wrong door and shoot some poor idiot who just stamps paperwork, we'll all be in body bags. Try me, princess." "Sit down," Daniel ordered, his tone cutting through the noise like a blade. The room froze. Daniel rarely raised his voice, but when he did, it carried the weight of command. "We stay focused. The Torinos are watching for us to slip. We don't give them the chance." Jennifer, quiet until now, whispered from the corner. "But what if it's someone you know? Someone you trusted?" The room went still. Daniel's gaze flicked to Keller, who shifted uneasily. "Then we deal with it," Daniel said flatly. "No matter who it is." The breakthrough 2 weeks into the hunt, Lydia finally slammed her hands down on the desk. "Got it." Everyone crowded around. On her screens bloomed a trail of transactions, encrypted memos, and heavily redacted communiques. The signatures were subtle but unmistakable. "This isn't a field leak," Keller whispered, pale. "It's top-down. Someone in Langley, higher than division chiefs, has been feeding the Torinos, protecting them, guiding them." Marcus cursed under his breath. "You're saying this isn't corruption, it's betrayal." Keller's hands trembled. I'm saying we're looking at an insider who outranks half the damn building. And if we push further, we'll be staring straight at the institution itself. Daniel's face was unreadable. His eyes were cold, calculating. Then we know where to look next. The safe house fell silent, the weight of betrayal pressing in like a storm about to break. Chapter 7. The Deputy Director. The city glowed beneath the winter night. 1,000 lights reflected in the glass skin of downtown's high-rises. Daniel stood across from the Wellington Grand, a hotel too expensive for tourists, too polished for ordinary government men, and therefore perfect for clandestine deals. Mitchell's voice buzzed in his earpiece. Conway checked in under alias Grant. Room 1705. He's expecting company, not you. You'll have a 10-minute window before his driver loops back. Daniel adjusted the collar of his coat. Plenty. From the outside, William Conway seemed like every other bureaucrat at Langley, middle-aged, iron suits, the kind of man who blended into conferences and committee hearings. But Daniel had seen the digital trail Lydia unearthed. Offshore accounts, encrypted communications, favors traded in blood. Conway wasn't just a leak. He was a rod at the very center. Daniel slipped through the lobby unnoticed, his body language tuned to invisibility. He rode the elevator up with a pair of bankers laughing about steak dinners, got off one floor early, then took the stairs to 17. At the door, he knocked once. A pause, then a gruff voice. "That you, Felix?" Daniel smiled coldly. "Not tonight." The door opened. Conway's expression froze at the sight of him. He was shorter than Daniel remembered, thinning hair, a face worn from too many lies. "Bradford," Conway whispered, his throat dry. "Jesus, you're supposed to be dead." Daniel stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a soft click. The suite was luxurious, plush carpet, bourbon glasses on the table, files spread across the desk. Shadows from the city's skyline crawled across the walls. "You've been busy," Daniel said evenly, scanning the papers. "Feeding intel to mobsters. Selling my country piece by piece." Conway's mask slipped into practiced composure. He poured himself a drink with shaky hands. "You don't understand. The agency is fractured. Budgets slashed. Politicians tying our hands. The Torinos, hell, they offered stability. Funding. Protection. A way to keep the machine running." Daniel's jaw flexed. "You sold out to criminals." "I adapted." Conway took a sip, eyes darting nervously. "You of all people should understand that. You were discarded, weren't you? Years of service, and what did they give you? A pension? Silence? They buried you, Daniel. At least I carved out relevance." Daniel moved closer, his presence filling the room like a storm cloud. "Relevance doesn't excuse betrayal." Conway set his glass down with a clink. "Let's be rational. You don't kill me. You and I make an arrangement. You want your family safe? I can give you that. I can reroute the Torinos, keep their eyes off Jennifer and the kids. You think they'll stop hunting you otherwise?" Daniel studied him, expression unreadable. "And all it cost me is my soul." Conway chuckled weakly. "You lost it a long time ago, soldier." The silence stretched. Daniel's gaze drifted to the desk, to the files Conway had been reviewing. He saw names, dozens of them, federal agents, judges, field officers, all compromised. Conway hadn't been dabbling. He had built an entire network of corruption. "You built an empire of ghosts," Daniel said softly. "Every name here is a knife in this country's back." Conway spread his hands. "Exactly. And knives pointed the right way can cut our enemies down. The Torinos aren't just thugs anymore. They're infrastructure. A shadow government. You think killing me will stop it? No, it'll bury you. But with me alive, you have options." Daniel's eyes hardened. "With you alive, the infection spreads." Conway's face blanched. "Don't be a fool. If you do this, you're not a phantom anymore. You're a headline. The agency will know. The Bureau will know. They'll hunt you harder than the Torinos ever could." Daniel drew his pistol, the silencer already threaded. His movements were slow, deliberate. Conway backed against the desk, knocking over his glass. "Wait. Daniel, listen. I can make you untouchable. I can rewrite your file, erase your debts. Hell, I can put your children under diplomatic shield. No one lays a finger on them." Daniel stepped closer, muzzle leveled at Conway's chest. His voice was low, steady, final. You had your chance to protect this country. You chose greed. Conway's breath quickened. Sweat trickled down his temple. Please. We were on the same side once. The silence shot cracked like a whisper. Conway jerked back, eyes wide, then slumped against the desk. His glass shattered on the floor, bourbon pooling into the carpet. His last breath rattled out, then silence. Daniel exhaled slowly, holstering his weapon. He moved to the desk, gathering every file, every drive, every shred of evidence. Names of agents, transaction ledgers, communications with Torino intermediaries. It was all there. Proof of the rot. He packed them into a satchel, his movements efficient, his face devoid of emotion. Inside, he felt the weight. Not guilt. He had learned long ago to burn that out of himself. But inevitability. Conway's death wasn't just execution, it was declaration. The moment the body was found, the world would know Daniel Bradford was alive, and he was at war. Mitchell's voice crackled in his ear. Status. Daniel glanced at Conway's still body one last time, then answered quietly, leak plugged. File secured. Clean exit. Mitchell asked. Daniel's eyes swept the suite. No witnesses. Silencer. Controlled shot. But no, this wasn't clean. Conway was too high profile. His absence would echo through Langley's halls by dawn. Not clean, Daniel admitted. Just necessary. He left the suite the way he had come, silent, invisible. But as he stepped into the night air, he knew the noose had tightened. William Conway, deputy director of the CIA, was dead, and Daniel Bradford had pulled the trigger. Chapter 8, The Gambit. The meeting was set in a warehouse on the south side, its corrugated metal siding tattooed with rust and graffiti. Inside, the air reeked of oil and damp wood. Daniel stood beneath the flickering light of a sodium lamp, hands loose at his sides, his expression unreadable. Across from him, Felix Higgins leaned on a cane he didn't need. Higgins dressed like a banker, charcoal suit, silk tie, but his eyes carried the cold amusement of a predator. Two men flanked him, broad-shouldered, the kind who spoke with their fists and concealed weapons. You're a difficult man to reach, Higgins said smoothly, voice rolling like velvet over broken glass. Velasquez thought he could own you. Lawrence thought he could kill you. Both ended up dead. And now we're here. A final offer. Daniel's gaze didn't waver. You're here because you're running out of lieutenants. Higgins smiled thinly. Even lions can shed a few teeth. But let's not posture. We want what you have, Daniel. Access. Files. Intelligence pipelines. You deliver, and your family keeps breathing. The words hung heavy. Mitchell's voice crackled faintly in Daniel's earpiece. Steady. All eyes on you. Lydia's in position. Ethan's primed on the back end. Daniel tilted his head slightly, as though considering the offer. And what happens after I hand you the keys? You let Jennifer and the kids live a quiet life in suburbia? Higgins chuckled, cane tapping the concrete. Something like that. But make no mistake, if you cross us, they die first. Daniel nodded once. Then let's make this fast. He placed a hard drive on the crate between them. Higgins's men stiffened, one of them reaching to inspect it. Higgins raised a hand to stop him, eyes narrowing at Daniel. Encrypted? Higgins asked. Not for long, Daniel replied. Custom pipeline. You'll get what you want, locations of black sites, personnel lists, transport schedules. Enough to put the agency in your pocket for the next decade. Higgins's gaze glittered with hunger. He reached for the drive, then paused. Why do I feel like you're enjoying this? Daniel allowed the faintest curl of a smile. Because you're smart enough to know I don't play games unless I'm holding all the cards. Across the city, the operation unfolded like clockwork. Lydia sat in a van 2 blocks away, multiple screens glowing blue across her face. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. I'm in. Their comms are rerouting through our dummy server. The moment they plug that drive in, I'll ghost their system and back-channel the entire operation log straight to justice. Ethan, holed up in a surveillance nest overlooking the warehouse, clicked his rifle's safety off. Visual on Higgins's crew. 20 outside, spread across the perimeter. All packing. Looks like we brought the right toys. Mitchell's voice carried calm authority. Phase 1 green. Phase 2 on my mark. Remember, Daniel's word triggers the chain. Inside, Higgins finally gestured for one of his men to collect the drive. The enforcer turned it over in his hand. Feels light. Daniel shrugged. Secrets don't weigh much. The enforcer slid the drive into a laptop perched on a nearby table. The screen blinked alive, a progress bar crawling across as files began to decrypt. Higgins leaned forward, studying the feed. You really did it. You traitorous bastard. Daniel's eyes flicked to the laptop, then back to Higgins. Funny. That's exactly what I was thinking about you. He tapped his earpiece subtly, a single word slipping from his lips. Now, Phase 2 ignited. The laptop screen glitched, code streaming faster than the enforcer could react. Lydia's voice sang through Daniel's ear. Got you, you sons of, transferring every packet straight to DOJ servers. Rico, net incoming. Simultaneously, the building shuddered as smoke grenades rolled in from side entrances, hissing white plumes. Ethan fired a suppressed shot, dropping a guard at the far door. Chaos erupted. Higgins staggered back, coughing. What the hell is this? Daniel moved like lightning. He struck the nearest bodyguard's wrist, sending his pistol clattering across the concrete. A palm heel strike crushed the man's nose. A sweep dumped him flat. The second bodyguard lunged, but Daniel twisted his cane out of Higgins's grip and drove it into the man's throat. Gunfire cracked outside, shouts of men panicking under the sudden assault. Ethan's precise shots dropped figures one by one in the confusion. Daniel grabbed Higgins by the lapels, slamming him against the crate. You want a bargain? Here's mine. You rot in a federal cage while your empire burns. Through the haze of smoke, Higgins laughed. Even his blood streaked his lip. You think you can kill us with paperwork? We own this city. We own. A concussion grenade went off outside, the warehouse doors blowing open. Tactical teams in federal gear stormed the building, rifles raised, voices commanding. Federal agents. On the ground. Now, Higgins froze. His men dropped weapons, some too slow, tackled into submission. The laptop still hummed on the table, screen flashing as Lydia's worm finalized the data dump. Daniel shoved Higgins toward the feds. He's all yours. The agents forced Higgins to his knees, zip ties cinching around his wrists. Rage burned in his eyes, but there was fear now, too, the kind of fear that came from realizing his empire had crumbled in one night. Minutes later, outside in the cold air, Daniel regrouped with Mitchell and Ethan by the van. Lydia stepped out, pale but triumphant, holding up a tablet displaying rows of seized assets and names lighting up on federal warrants. DOJ just triggered RICO across 4 states, Lydia said, voice shaking with adrenaline. Torino accounts frozen. Properties seized. Over 60 warrants executed. It's happening. Mitchell clapped her on the shoulder. You just kneecapped a dynasty. Ethan scanned the perimeter, rifle slung casually over his back. For tonight, maybe, but men like Higgins don't stay down forever. Someone hires already moving pieces. Daniel stood silent for a moment, watching Higgins shoved into an armored vehicle, still shouting curses muffled by the closed doors. His face was calm, but his mind calculated. The Torinos had taken a body blow, yes. Their financial arteries cut, their leadership exposed. But a wounded beast was often the most dangerous. Mitchell studied Daniel. You know this doesn't end here, right? Daniel nodded once, eyes cold, voice low. It never ends. Not until the last piece falls. The sirens wailed into the night as the convoy of federal vehicles pulled away, headlights piercing the fog. The gambit had worked, at least for now. But Daniel knew the war was far from finished. Chapter 9, Fallout and Bounty. The morning after the raids, Chicago felt different. Sirens still screamed in the distance, and news vans dotted every major intersection. But it wasn't the public panic that unnerved Daniel. It was the quiet, invisible ripples spreading through the underworld. Mitchell leaned over a coffee-stained laptop at the safe house, eyes scanning encrypted chatter. It's worse than we thought, he muttered, voice low. The Torinos aren't just angry. They're global now. There's a bounty. 10 million international. Every gun for hire with a passport knows your face, Daniel. Daniel didn't flinch. He sipped black coffee, bitter and grounding. His eyes, however, were already mapping threats, calculating escape routes, exit contingencies, and safe houses that didn't exist yet. Jennifer hovered near the door, still pale from the previous night's chaos. 10 million. Her voice trembled. Daniel, they want you dead. They do, Daniel said simply, his tone flat but steady. He set the cup down and ran a hand through his hair. But bounties don't scare me. They guide me. Mitchell leaned back, exhaling sharply. It's more than just money. Federal audits show the corruption runs deeper than we thought. Your so-called allies, some of them aren't. Half the agency's internal security is compromised. Daniel's eyes hardened. Then we rebuild the network. From scratch if we have to. The phone rang. It was Higgins. Daniel answered, voice clipped. You've had your fun. Talk fast. Higgins's tone was brittle, edged with fear. You don't understand the heat I'm under. The bosses, they're breathing down my neck. I don't want to die in the streets. I'll talk. I'll give you what you need. Just keep me alive. Daniel paused, studying him. The former enforcer had flipped under pressure, scared, exposed, and entirely predictable. Locations, schedules, vulnerabilities. I don't want excuses, Felix. I want action. Higgins rattled off addresses, safe houses, and routines. Every detail of the Torino network he had memorized now spilled into Daniel's hands like precious currency. That's all I've got. Take it or leave it, he finished, voice cracking. Daniel's gaze hardened. You'll live. For now. But if you cross me, I know. Higgins interrupted, barely above a whisper. Daniel hung up. The files were gold, but the timing was delicate. He could feel the Torinos' retaliation building, like a storm behind a horizon, slow and patient, ready to strike where he least expected. Jennifer approached him cautiously. So what now? Her hands were clammy, fingers twisting the hem of her sweater. Do we go somewhere safe? Daniel nodded. Yes, but won't be forever. Federal protection will hide us for a time. But eventually, the Torinos will adapt. We have to be ready for that. She swallowed hard, looking at him with a mix of fear and awe. I don't know how you do this. I can't even imagine. Daniel knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. You don't have to imagine. You have to survive. That's your job. The rest, that's mine. Jennifer's eyes brimmed with tears. And the kids? They're already on their way to a secure location, Daniel said. Feds will handle them. They're safe for now. The safe house became a hive of calculated urgency. Mitchell coordinated satellite feeds and encrypted communications with federal partners still trustworthy. Lydia tapped into global databases, tracing Torino's possible retaliation vectors, money laundering, offshore shell companies, contract killers abroad. Marcus trained and conditioned Daniel's team for rapid response scenarios. Daniel himself didn't rest. He reviewed Higgins' intel, memorized patterns, and ran simulations in his mind. Every possible ambush point, every street the Torinos could use, every federal agent who could be compromised, he cataloged them all. You can't fight ghosts with blind courage, he muttered to Mitchell as he spread maps across the table. You need foresight, patience, and precision. We've won a battle, not the war. Mitchell nodded. And the family? Daniel's eyes softened momentarily as he glanced toward the corner where Jennifer had finally settled with a cup of coffee, still pale, still trembling. Protected. For now. But protection is temporary. Every shield has a weak point. Every guard falls asleep eventually. Hours later, Daniel drove a nondescript van to a government-secured safe house on the outskirts of Virginia. Jennifer sat beside him, hands folded tightly in her lap, fingers interlaced so tightly her knuckles were white. Will they find us? She asked quietly, barely audible over the hum of the engine. They'll try, Daniel said, but they'll only find what I want them to find. Smoke and mirrors, Jennifer. Every trace, every lead controlled. She exhaled, her shoulders sagging as if releasing months of tension in a single breath. I just want the kids to have a normal life. A real life. Daniel's lips twitched faintly, almost a smile. They will. But normal comes at the cost of chaos. And chaos is my business. The van rolled to the safe house gates, a federal checkpoint confirming their credentials with silent efficiency. Daniel handed over the satchel of evidence from Higgins Intel, along with their own contingency plans. Agents escorted Jennifer and the kids to secured living quarters, medical and psychological support already in place. She clutched his hand before stepping inside. "Promise me you'll come back." Daniel nodded once, pressing his thumb to her fingers. "I always do." Then he let go, stepping back as the doors closed. Once the family was secured, Daniel convened with his team inside the van outside the perimeter. The city stretched below them, glittering innocently, hiding every threat in its shadows. "Rico's just the start," Daniel said. "Torino's infrastructure is exposed. But every agent they've compromised, every shell account, every ghost operative, they know we have it now. They're recalibrating. They're angry. And they'll retaliate." Mitchell exhaled. "And Higgins?" "He's talking." Daniel nodded. "For now, he knows the alternative. Every routine, every vulnerability. We have a map of their operations like never before. But it's fragile. One mistake and it all collapses." Lydia glanced at her monitors, still streaming patterns from the Torino's communications. "Even with this intel, it's a powder keg. One misstep, and the international bounty turns from rumor to reality." Marcus slammed his hand against the console. "Then we make sure they can't reach him, or us, or anyone." Daniel's expression darkened. "We protect what we can, strike where we must, and prepare for the endgame." Higgins gave us a roadmap, but the journey's far from over. Silence fell over the team as the weight of the moment sank in. They had won a massive blow against the Torinos, but the reprisal would come. The city, the agencies, even global mercenaries, they were all now aware of Daniel Bradford's existence and his lethal precision. Daniel's jaw tightened. He thought of Jennifer and the kids, of the months of quiet smiles and bedtime stories now punctuated by alarms and sirens. Their safety was provisional, delicate, and fleeting. He inhaled slowly, centering himself. There was no fear, not for himself, not for the team, but for what was next. For the one final reckoning he had been shaping in the shadows, the decisive strike that would end the threat once and for all. Daniel stood outside the safe house, night wind brushing against his face. The bounty posters, digital alerts, and chatter in every corner of the world marked him as the target of every assassin, soldier, and opportunist with $1 and a gun. But he was ready, and he knew, deep in his core, that the end game, the personal reckoning that would allow his family to truly live in peace, was coming. Chapter 10, Sunday at St. Anani's. The city was unusually quiet that Sunday morning, as if the streets themselves were holding their breath. Daniel sat in the shadow of a narrow alley, eyes scanning the stone facade of St. Anani's Church across the square. The sunlight glinted off stained glass windows, throwing colored patterns onto the pavement. Children's laughter echoed faintly from a nearby playground, a cruel contrast to the storm of violence Daniel had orchestrated for years. Mitchell leaned against the van's side, sipping coffee from a paper cup, his face unreadable behind dark sunglasses. "All clear on the streets. Foot traffic's normal. No unexpected tales." Daniel nodded, his mind tracing every detail Higgins had provided: the routes, the security routines, the bodyguard rotations, the predictable arrival times. Everything the Torinos relied on, now cataloged and timed to the second. "Remember," Daniel said quietly, voice barely above the hum of traffic, "this isn't just about eliminating Gilberto. It's about ending the entire chain, every enabler, every operative, every piece of infrastructure that's keeping his empire alive. One clean strike. No collateral mistakes." Mitchell tilted his head, scanning the church entrance. "And the family? Jennifer's still secure." "She's under federal protection," Daniel replied. His tone was flat, controlled. "They're safe. For now. I'm the variable in this equation." Lydia's voice buzzed faintly through the earpiece. "Digital sweep is complete. Parking cameras, nearby communications, mobile traffic, nothing out of place. The Torino cell's blind spots are consistent with Higgins' intel. Daniel exhaled, his fingers drumming lightly on the dashboard. Good. That's the margin we need. No surprises. Timing is everything. Ethan, stationed 2 blocks away with Overwatch, clicked his binoculars up, visual on the target. He's arriving in the roles as expected. 2 bodyguards. Routine entourage. Sunday blessing route is predictable. No deviations. Daniel allowed himself a brief nod. The pattern held. Predictability was the key to his strategy, a cruel advantage against a man who had relied on intimidation and chaos for decades. Inside the van, the team ran through contingencies. Marcus checked weapons, chambering rounds silently. If they notice me, they're dead before they can blink. But Daniel, you're moving alone, right? Daniel's eyes never left the church doors. I operate alone when necessary. I control the perimeter from my vantage. The team's role is containment, extraction, and electronic support. Nothing more. Mitchell leaned closer. You ready to make this final calculation? Daniel's lips tightened. It's already calculated. Timing, entry, exit, collateral, all aligned. Every variable accounted for. Every escape route prepped. The moral calculus, weighed and accepted. This ends now. Lydia's voice cut back in, tinged with nervous excitement. I've looped every comm channel. Federal oversight is blind to us for the next 30 minutes. Once you move, nobody outside the team can see or interfere. You get in, execute, and get out before anyone notices anomalies. Daniel's hand brushed over the Glock in his waistband, a familiar weight of assurance. Muscle memory, reflex training, years of anticipation, all of it converged in this moment. Outside, a black Rolls-Royce rolled into the church parking lot at exactly 10:02 a.m., its engine purring like a predator. Gilberto Torino stepped out, impeccably dressed, cane in hand, flanked by 2 burly bodyguards. He moved slowly, deliberately, waving at familiar congregants, his smile measured, oblivious to the storm about to descend. Daniel observed every motion. Step by step, he tracked body language, micro-expressions, and habits. Higgins' intel had been precise. Gilberto always lingered near the same stained glass window during his greeting, always nodding toward the choir, always checking his watch twice before entering the main sanctuary. Confirmation, Daniel murmured into his comm, target in position. Pattern verified. Mitchell responded softly, copy. Overwatch is ready. Extraction and digital support in position. All clear. Lydia added, final data sweep is locked. Any deviation from schedule triggers alerts to me immediately. You get one shot. Daniel's jaw tightened. I know. For a long moment, he allowed himself to breathe, feeling the rhythm of the morning, the warmth of the sunlight on his face, and the weight of years of conflict converging in this single frame. Children playing, pedestrians walking by, the choir preparing to sing, life moving oblivious to the shadow that now hovered over the square. This is it, he muttered under his breath. The final reckoning. Ethan clicked his scope, scanning rooftops and alleys for snipers or observers. No tails detected. Minimal interference. Wind and visibility optimal. Marcus checked the sidearm on his belt, nodding at Daniel. You're golden, boss. Just go. Daniel's eyes flicked to the church entrance one last time. Gilberto raised a hand in greeting to a parishioner. A flicker of arrogance in that smile. It had always been his undoing. Daniel stepped from the shadows of the alley. Each footfall measured, silent, deliberate. His movements were fluid, controlled, as if part of the dance only he knew. The Glock rested lightly in his hand, fingertip tracing the trigger with ease. Every muscle was alert, every nerve charged. Through the earpiece, Lydia whispered, "You're clear. Execute on your mark." Daniel paused at the corner of the square, scanning escape routes one more time. The alley behind him, the side street leading to the river, the rooftop extraction for long-range support. Every avenue secured, every contingency rehearsed in his mind hundreds of times. Mitchell's voice. Countdown started. You're live in 5. Daniel's lips pressed into a thin line. Good. Timing is perfect, all variables accounted for. He glanced at the church one last time. Gilberto's posture, the bodyguards' positions, the civilians milling unknowingly, it was all aligned. The final strike, the culmination of years of strategy, preparation, and brutal calculation, lay within reach. For a heartbeat, he allowed himself a moment to feel the weight of it all. The betrayal, the lies, the blood spilled, the family he had shielded, the empire of crime and corruption that had festered for decades. He exhaled slowly, centering himself. Calm, focused, ready. Daniel Bradford adjusted the strap of his tactical vest beneath his coat, brushed the dust from his sleeve, and stepped into the open. His eyes locked on the church entrance, every step deliberate, every thought anchored in one immutable truth. This would end today. The square was quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic and the faint notes of the choir tuning. The world around him moved in ignorant peace, unaware of the storm converging on its doorstep. He reached the edge of the pavement outside the church. The sun glinted off his watch. The Glock was steady in his grip. The escape routes were primed. The moral calculus weighed. Daniel Bradford paused, taking one last measure of the scene, his team watching from vantage points, the city unknowingly holding its breath. And then he stepped closer, poised for the decisive, final reckoning that would either end the war permanently or ignite the next chapter of chaos.